Good afternoon, folks. Nice to see some faces that I'm not used to seeing at these BIM events. The reason that's a good thing is because I say the same thing at all of these events, quite frankly. And the reason is there's a lot to take in about this new era of digital engineering that we are moving into as a planet, as a species. Because the way we manage ourselves, our projects, the infrastructure that gets created as a result of investment, that is changing. And it's changing very quickly. And the way that technology is enabling different types of information to be produced, to be leveraged, to be used in all kinds of different ways is interesting. It's also daunting. And I think that's why we've got the topic today of how do we actually do this in our place here in Africa. How do we BIM in Africa? So I'm going to take you through quite a bit of theory now. And for those of you who've heard it before, it will be a refresher. And it's intended to level the playing field of knowledge about what BIM is, and maybe what it's not. And also this very important standard called 19650. Has anyone spoken about 19650 today? Yes. Who spoke about it? What did you learn? You guys didn't learn anything, oh dear. Okay. So I'm going to recap the 19650 standard, but I'm going to give you a view that maybe you haven't seen before, which is a play-by-play of what 19650 actually asks the project team and the asset owners to do. Some of you may have seen this progression, and then it'll be a refresher, but it's to take you through the logical steps of who needs to do what in order to prepare a project to actually be delivered and get outcomes that are required. Then you would have seen a tongue-in-cheek thing about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Did you see that on the program? We've taken a maturity scale of lots of numbers and letters, and we've converted it into something that is very close to a children's fairy tale. About a little girl that goes and gets lost in the wood, and then she finds a cabin and she walks in, and there's three of everything. And one is too cold, one is too hot, and the other one's just right. The one is too hard, and the other one's too soft, and the other one's just right. And the analogy is really when you start going into something new, like this world of BIM and digital engineering, it's hard to peg where you need to land and where you need to start. And the intention of our conversation for the rest of today is to give all of you an opportunity to wrestle with your own thoughts and emotions and plans and ideas around BIM in a very practical manner. Because if we're going to do BIM in Africa, each of us needs to figure out how we play a part in that. And we also need to figure out what makes sense. Because we're not all going to shoot for Rolls-Royce. Some of us are going to go for a Ford or a Toyota, or wherever you want to peg it. And that is very contextual. So before lunch, we're going to do a lot of theory. And you'll just have to pinch yourself every now and then, but hopefully I can keep it interesting. After lunch, you are going to do the work, and I'm going to listen. After lunch, we're going to go through 5 questions. And those questions are penetrating. They're asking about how you do things, how you currently operate, how you currently use technology, who you've currently got in your teams, in your organizations, in your companies, who you work with. Is it working or not? And can you see the gaps? After looking at what I'm going to show you now, can you see the gaps and start formulating how to close those gaps? If we can achieve that today, then we would have taken a big step towards answering the question, how do you BIM in Africa? So let's get going. Long time ago, this is what our offices used to look like. And a few years later, our offices changed to start looking like that. And many of our offices still look like that. There was a fundamental shift between those two offices. The one involved making marks on paper. The other one involved using computers to make marks on paper. Well done, you got it. But the interesting thing is many of us got stuck on the computers part, and we thought, brilliant, we've arrived, we're using technology, we are modern. all we did was find a better way to make marks on paper. Then we started realizing that drawings were a little bit overrated, because if we could show a picture of a building and everything inside it, and whether it's a building or a water treatment works or a highway, doesn't really matter, that picture was able to convey meaning in a much more vivid manner. And when lots of people who need to do lots of things in a coordinated manner look at the same picture, the level of understanding increases. The coordination and the collaboration improved. And so this became the beginning of a revolution in how we deliver projects. The interesting thing is that it didn't change fundamentally the maths and the science of what we do in engineering, architecture, construction, you name it. Fundamentally, it's still producing assets, but the way we do it has changed forever. So that really speaks to another continuum of history, where we look at how different technologies have changed the way we do things. What I find most interesting about this continuum is actually the next step in this journey, 5.0. We're in 4.0 now, where we're converting everything into soft copy, and we're trying to figure out how to use our soft copy information effectively. The next step, we're starting to see the first fruits, I'm experiencing it personally, is how we communicate and collaborate with technology, not just with each other. And that augmentation of the human ingenuity is very interesting. But it's not going to work unless we've got good information. So fascinating picture this, around what fundamental changes are happening in the world. The 3 lines represent 3 different types of activities that we do. We produce documents, we produce geometry, we produce data. But the proportion of how we spend our effort is changing. Up until now, we've spent most of our time producing documents, if you think about it. We make marks on paper, as I said. We also produce 3D geometry, and historically, 3D pictures have really been artistic impressions. They've been an aid in communication. They've been something to help sell, something to help wow. That's going to continue, but it's not going to increase as fast as data. And when we talk about data, whenever I hear someone talking about data, I always want to say, what do you mean? What is data? Is it just ones and zeros? Is it documents? Is it pictures? Is it videos? Is it models? What is data? The answer is yes. It's all of those things. But when that stuff is badly structured, it's not worth that line. And that line is important, because if that information and data is of good quality, then those khokhas over there that represent AI start working. AI consumes data and reprocesses existing information to create new stuff. If you've used ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or one of those things, if you've used it properly, you would have realized that garbage in really produces garbage out. I mean, that machine can do whatever it likes, and you wouldn't be any the wiser. But when you start using proper prompts, when you start feeding those algorithms with the information that you wanted to use as raw material, you really get gold. I've used that extensively in my research just for today. And the augmentation of my knowledge on the subject and my ability to ask the right questions of the algorithm and point it towards the right source data meant that I could accumulate information that I'm going to present to you reliably with cross-references that I checked in a very short amount of time. Now that's important, because we're very busy these days, and our projects are getting bigger and bigger. We have less and less time to faff around trying to find stuff. But it means that as we start leveraging technology, we've got to be cognizant of the quality of information and make sure that we spend a lot of effort in that space. So you are there, along with me, and we're at a point where soon we should be producing or spending more effort on the quality of information than we are spending on putting marks on paper. When we start talking about asset information, it's a very interesting topic, because it is something it's a term that we drop into our conversations, but do we really understand what it means? When we look at asset management as a concept, I think many people think facilities management or they think operations. Asset management is a very big topic. Is anyone from an asset management background in the room? Any asset management? Thank you. Anyone else? All right, plug for you. Asset managers look at everything, from before a project is even conceived till way after the project is finished and all of us walk away off-site. That is the realm of asset management. It's understanding how we value and utilize everything that has been created. And so the realm of BIM really is concerned with how do we produce information that is useful in the asset management context. And asset information becomes a critical deliverable for all of our projects. So we take something like that bridge balustrade. When National Roads Agency needs to manage their assets and understand where is a certain type of balustrade present on our road network, if they were able to filter out through all of their databases and understand where the F1 type balustrade has been used anywhere in the road network because there was suddenly a flaw in the manufacturing, that would be a game changer, as opposed to having to trawl through lots of papers, right? Even roads. I'm a roads engineer, by the way. This is my happy place. Asset management has a very structured and very deliberate way of thinking about how it is done. And right at the bottom of that picture, it's a bit of an eye test for everyone, but this purple block over here says information management. And then that blue cycle over there that I've enlarged over there is the asset life cycle. Most of us in the room, except for the asset manager, are involved in that blue ring over there. That's our primary focus. And I'm guessing that most of us are involved with the creation of assets. Who's not involved in the creation primarily, but in the operation of assets? Hands up? Sure. Pay attention to that, because the conversation today is very typical of where the industry is currently. Most of us are concerned about creating assets. Many fewer of us are concerned about making those assets last. And BIM is about both creating and extending the life of assets. And so as we start improving the way we produce information, we actually produce the raw materials for operations and for us to be able to maximize the value of assets. Asset management is about making sure that you get return on investment. One of the sad things about South Africa is we're brilliant at making, we're not so good at keeping. And we need to get better at that. So the standard, did you see this picture earlier today? No, great. So this picture is very important because it provides context of how three important standards in your life work together. First is ISO 9001. Everybody heard of 9001? Good. Thank you for nodding, by the way. This is supposed to be very interactive, so you can loudly. So 9000 is the standard that says you're an actual proper organization. If you don't have a 9000 standard, well, then you're probably just a hobbyist. All of us work under that, and that is the quality standard. And it says that you do the right thing consistently as you intended to do it. The next, and that's the orange ring on the outside. The next one is the yellowish ring, which is the 55,000 standard, which we've just spoken about. And it's interesting to see how this diagram is put together, because quality is everything. Quality is your biggest umbrella. Inside that is the operations related to the assets. So most of us are in the CapEx phase, so our clients are involved in creating and managing and operating assets within their quality system to make money. That's what they do, or to serve the community. But that management of assets, as you saw in the previous picture, is underpinned by that foundational block of information. So that blue ring on the inside represents the creation of information. And it's a very important paradigm to understand, is that when we create information in BIM, we create that information not just for the small puzzle piece, which is the project delivery phase, but very especially for the bigger puzzle piece, which is the operational phase. And just like on the asset management picture, there was a cycle, the project cycle continues as well. So you have initial construction, you then have upgrades, you have refurbishments, you have extensions, But it is a cycle of information that, if we do well, will serve successive projects, will serve the paradigm of asset management, which will ultimately lead to better quality. So, let's quickly talk about how projects happen. And I'm showing you this not because you don't understand projects, but I'm showing you how your familiarity about projects links up with what the ISO requires. So the text in purple are things that are required by that ISO standard, the blue ring on the inside, or the SANS standard in South Africa now. And so you can keep track of where things are supposed to happen. I have to look around because for some reason I can't see my heads-up display. So right at the beginning of the project, the person or the party that's creating that project, the client or the employer or the appointing party, has to do quite a lot of homework and identifying what information they want to get created out of that project. And with that in mind, they will then go through planning and procuring a professional team. A professional team will come on, go through a design process, and they will follow an agreed upon execution plan to produce that information. A very, very systematic process. None of this is haphazard. None of it happens last minute or as an afterthought. Right? That's where it's supposed to be. Then we go through the design and the engineering process, we construct, and we update information. Very important step in the process, because everything we thought in the design is proven or disproven or changed in construction. So during construction, the same structure of information is maintained, but a new replacement set is actually created. There's probably going to be some debate around this point. Some people are saying the information gets pulled through from the very beginning in a continuous cycle all the way through. That is true. That is called a golden thread. But the information is replaced along the way and updated through a versioning process. The information that we as design engineers create to describe what must be built gets replaced by more up-to-date, more accurate, more correct information during construction. And that is ultimately what's handed over. And it's an important concept to grasp, because there's the process of project delivery in BIM is almost like a relay race, where different parties are actually receiving information from a previous phase and running the next leg of that race all the way through. Through the construction and commissioning process, that information reaches its ultimate pinnacle. Because at the commissioning process, everything that could be known about that asset is known. And a month later, that team disperses, and all of the knowledge that hasn't been captured is lost forever. And that is a critical point in history. If we don't capitalize on that moment of commissioning properly, you'll never regain it. I'm working on a project right now where the client is paying a massive premium because they didn't anticipate the step. But fortunately, they realized, and they have the capital to invest, they realized how important that would be. And it is so important that they're investing heavily in capturing that information before it gets lost. We underestimate how important data is. We really do. And although we use phrases like data is the new oil or the new gold, I suspect we use it because we're opportunistic and we're hoping that it's going to bring us a great return. If we turn that around emotionally and philosophically and we say, because it is so precious, we should spend great effort protecting it and cultivating it, it will change our behavior, and it will mean that we are able to naturally align much closer to what we're trying to do. When we get to handover, and all of that amazing information that's now being very carefully created and curated and checked and approved gets put into something very important called an asset information model. And that, for let's take a large portfolio owner that has millions of square meters of buildings in multiple places. Their entire portfolio would be in an asset information model. Now, when you hear the model, don't think 3D model necessarily. Think an information model, which consists of maps and diagrams and pictures and 3D models and data and spreadsheets. It's the complete body of knowledge about their portfolio. And that is ultimately what gets used in the asset management process. So as creators of information, we're actually feeding into a very, very large system. Historically, that system was kind of dead-ended at construction. And most of us have grown up in a paradigm where you take the design drawings, you redline them, you stamp them, and you post them off. And those drawings end up in a filing cabinet somewhere. The world we're moving into, where we want to be managing the world better, especially with the scarcity of resources and our need to be more resilient, relies on us doing this very well. So building information modeling, or better information management as I prefer to call it, is really around this holistic approach to information. If you work in the built environment, remember I'm a roads engineer, so this is about as much as I know of Revit, is you work like in models that fit inside each other, right? And that's essentially a process of coordinating design. Now the reason we do this is because we want stuff not to bump into each other. I call this selfish BIM. It is very, very effective to save money in construction. And we have to do this. Please, everyone, if you're not doing clash-aware design, you're wasting somebody's money, and probably your own as well. But let's put the asset management hat back on. What this process does is it gives us an opportunity to create information. Again, projects that we're involved with, where the client wants to do a digital twin. Very exciting. Everyone wants the digital twin. Digital twins are like that hoja on that previous graph that needs to consume data. If the data is poor, digital twin's dead. Period. And so this process of being able to create classified, organized, structured information is the beginning of a digital twin. If you don't do that, forget it. It's a pretty picture. And being able to link documentation, information that describes the assets themselves, information that links to time and cost. You're wondering how to do 4D and 5D, right? Those of you who've heard 4D and 5D, two simple things. A WBS code and a cost code. Stick it in your parameters, you're sorted. There's a lot of work down the line. But those two little things there unlock so much. The other ones, the classification identifiers, that unlocks your 60 and 70. You've heard those things. We're going to talk about them now. Let's compare 3D modeling with BIM. 3D modeling is creating pictures. So our artists used to do that ever since we could animate. And ever since you've been able to draw a 3D perspective, you've created 3D models. Information modeling is about creating these things. It's about having a descriptive model that describes what you want to build, being able to connect that with information, documentation, specifications, being able to link it to project schedules so that you can actually see how far a project should be at certain stages. Incredibly effective if you've got multiple stages that need to work in the same spot. I saw a fantastic presentation of Istanbul Airport where they did a 4D BIM simulation of their temporary works, and they could see exactly where the slabs on the parking lot needed to remain open and closed so they could put the tower cranes, keep them in place as long as possible, and when they needed to remove certain temporary works because the new permanent works would be clashing with the temporary works. Stuff that they wouldn't be able to do if they hadn't simulated it in time. So the advantages of going through this process are many. Here are a few examples. When we start doing proper BIM, even just 3D, we're able to hand over a pack of information to the people who need to get value out of that asset that actually connects to the information about it. So think about guarantees, warranties, operations manuals, supplier information. Where do I buy the door handles for that door? Imagine having an information model where you can very quickly filter out all of my ironmongery, see where it is, access the purchase information, order a new part in under 5 minutes. That's the kind of thing we want to be able to do because that's smart, that's intelligent, as opposed to what's the standard procedure? Go to the library, find the right file, sucks, wrong file, that file, write it down, phone. Simple example, but very, very effective, especially if you start looking at scale. Let's look at cash flow and visualizations. I have this picture in my mind of a cost controller, and instead of looking just through Gantt charts and schedules, They click on the payment certificate and up pops the model, color-coded to see what does this payment certificate cover. Clicking on a filter that says, show me the difference between last month and this month's payment certificate locally. Show me that in terms of time. How much of that was supposed to be last month? Simple concept, 2 parameters in your model, and an awareness between your modeler and your scheduler. We should be doing this, people. It's not hard. Or maybe it is, but you're just not aware of it. Sustainability ratings, being able to filter through the components of your building and understand where are the parts that are contributing towards a poor or a good score. Being able to then use that information to selectively start replacing during its life cycle as new products become available, as new opportunities come to actually save. And then asset performance and asset management. The amount of information that we can collect and the computing power to process information about performance. In industrial applications, think of a SCADA system, which is like an industrial BMS, and how you can collect information from all over your plant, analyze that. We already do that, but that information sits on a red, amber, green dashboard. But being able to suck that into a database, analyze it for optimized opportunities, and then be able to visualize those scenarios, that's what that opens up. Interesting thing is, in South Africa, we're not getting this in our tenders yet. The BIM community is working very hard to make sure you do, which means we need to get ready. The tricky thing about this conversation, I'm speaking from a consultant's point of view now, is we're essentially writing our own exam papers, and we need to get ready to write the exams ourselves. And it's an interesting position to be in, but the privilege we have is we've got time to study. We've got time to get ready. Today is about asking yourselves the question, what do I need to do to get ready? That's after lunch. But let's first look at what you need to be ready for. So how do we deliver projects? Project delivery is a team effort. So these are my project team. Folks on your left, folks on the left are the client team. Key stakeholders, corporate management, asset managers. Looks a bit different from you, but you're there. Project managers, how many project managers in the room? Sure. We need to get more project managers and asset owners in the room. Professional teams, architects, engineers, contractors. Oh my goodness. All right, so most of us are that, okay, all right. I'm going to put you in context for the rest of the team. What this project team needs to do is to deliver a project. Now the big arrow represents the lifespan of the asset that they're going to create. The project team gets involved in that little piece over there. Well, actually this little piece is about that in real life, right? Because that asset exists for 50 to 100 years, hopefully. Nevertheless, the project team gets involved with that in the CapEx phase, but what really happens with that asset is it delivers value after handover for many, many, many years. Now, how do we make sure that we don't be short-sighted over there, but actually enable the rest of the operation to be successful and deliver value? And that is where the ISO says we've got to take our focus off exclusively the project team and start bringing in the other stakeholders. So stay with me, this is going to go quickly. The 19650 standard says the owner and the asset managers need to state their requirements up front. That means that they can take the lessons learned and the intelligence about the operation, push it to the front of the project and say, we know what information we need to get at handover. So specify that up front. Then the standard says, right, we're going to give you a recipe how to do that. Number one, the folks who run the organization need to figure out what information makes them tick. What information are they going to need to answer questions, to solve problems, to make critical operational decisions? What format must that information be? What management systems is it going to feed into? That needs to be specified up front. the folks who are going to actually operate the assets, they need to say, well, what information about the assets do we need? What format do I want my as-built in? What tagging structure do I want on my equipment? What system am I going to integrate this into for reporting purposes? What purchasing information do I need? What inventory, etc. And that forms two documents called Organizational Information Requirement, or OIR. Everything's about acronyms. And an Asset Information Requirement, or an AIR. And the reason they do that is because those two things are requirements for the project that ultimately make sure that the project delivers the stuff that goes inside here, into the asset information model. Now, this picture is incredible because the professional team hasn't even been hired yet. Contractor hasn't even been thought of. Project managers hopefully going to be there. They're quite useful in this conversation, but even the project managers don't need to be there. The client needs to think ahead. And this is something that we're trying to get more clients in the room so we can have this discussion as well. So please tell your clients they need to come to the room community. Once they've figured that out, they can then write the specifications and they can make sure that in that tender coming to you soon, there are actually proper requirements. Right, we appoint the professional team, project managers, professional team, contractor, they're on it. And they're working in a very organized fashion. And this is where the common data environment is vitally important. So that's CDE, common data environment. Anyone heard of a CDE? Anyone using a CDE? Some? It's good. You need to. Working in that CDE means that you can actually, in a very organized and structured manner, satisfy those information requirements because it's a continuous team effort to produce the information. And so that team makes sure that during the course of that construction process, they are producing information that aims towards handover. Because at the handover, another very interesting thing is specified by the standard, which says the model that comes out of the CDE, the final results of information that has been produced, not just the brick and mortar, but the actual information, ultimately needs to find its way into the asset information model, which is what we said at the beginning. And this gatekeeper has the authority, according to the standard, to say, no, it's not ready, it's not done. That big project where the client has discovered that they need to collect that information, they're currently going to reject some of the work because, not the physical works, but the handover, because they're saying the information isn't ready. If they said it was fine, then they would spend the next 10, 15 years trying to close the information gaps. So the asset manager has to say, it's not ready, guys. You can't walk away yet because that information is precious. So when we say data is the new gold or the new oil, we really need to start owning that and understanding when we're creating information, we're dealing with somebody else's precious goods. It's a very, very high priority. So let's put this into a blow by blow. And I'm happy to distribute this to everyone as a crib note, because I think it's really useful to have in conversations with your colleagues at the office and to think through yourself. I refer to this all the time to remind myself of how it works. So starting off, the standard says you've got to understand what you need and define that up front. It's your OIR, AIR, and asset information model. And the people involved, they are really the client. This is a job of a client. Clients might appoint a consultant to help them do this. That's probably going to be the case in the first couple of years of adopting in South Africa. Their job is not over yet because they need to take those requirements and then actually write a spec. And these specs get written into the tender documents. Those of you who've worked internationally, working internationally in Middle East projects, you would know that there's usually quite a hefty section that deals with the naming conventions, the specifications for information, the formats, the CD definitions, etc. All of that stuff gets written into those information specs, again, before the consultants even get involved. Then we go through a procurement process, and all of us put our best foot forward, and we demonstrate both our capacity and our ability to deliver what they need to do. That's, again, an incredibly significant small phrase. It is as important to prove that you've got enough yellow machines and capital to be able to deliver a project as it is, to prove that you're actually able to produce the right format of information. That's significant. Then we go into the execution phase. Now it's all about the professional team. We're in the spotlight here. And then we hand over, and you've got to make sure that that information is right, and then the information gets integrated back. What's so fascinating to me is how I think all of us in the built environment are so focused around the project. But if you look at the information landscape, that's the project. There's so much that has to happen either side, and that asset management picture is so important. If we want to see our continent going from most stuff's broken or breaking to most stuff is in good nick and is being well managed, we've got to get this right. So that is that. That's what the ISO says, or the SANS. Got to get used to saying SANS. SANS 19650. So that's what it says. And that is essentially, if we want to be doing BIM, this is ground zero. If you can't do this, well, then you're doing some version of 3D modeling and information exchange, which is useful. It's selfish BIM. But if we want to do big BIM, then this is what it's about. So the key takeaways from this section, then I'm going to ask you to stand up and take a breath, because we're going to jump into some more heavy-duty stuff now. Key takeaways are that according to the SAN standard, information requirements and the production of information is a team effort, and it's something that needs to be prescribed up front. So if you are wanting to start becoming a BIM doer, and you're not getting requirements from your client, then you're probably going to have to figure out your own BIM requirements for yourself. Figure out your selfish BIM and figure out how it's going to serve your own purposes. And we'll talk a bit about that now. But if you are working with clients that are inclined to manage themselves better, it's a great opportunity to actually broach the topic with them and start talking about what information would you like me to produce on this project that is going to assist your operations. How would you like us to go the extra mile in making sure that you don't just get a pile of paper at the end of the project? And you might be surprised at the opportunities and avenues for consulting work that opens for you who are in the consulting space. That's also how we're going to move the needle. So now I'm speaking with my BIM community hat on. We've got to try and accelerate this process, because there's a lot of us who've invested quite heavily. But until such time as the whole playing field changes, selfish BIM is expensive. But BIM that is being specified and done deliberately, that starts driving a new industry. I think I covered all of that. So, I love this picture because a friend of mine called Andrew Mason always used to tell the story about, engineers and architects that like to sort of toss the keys over their shoulder as they walk out the door at commissioning, and it's the facilities manager's job to catch them and try and make something happen. And I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if that bunch of keys had a memory stick on it and had all the data? It's a very bad image, but I think it's just a reminder to me about how important it is to hand over the keys and the data. Those things, that bunch of keys, to me represents the complete picture, the possession of the physical and the virtual. All right. So here's a little story, and I'm going to ask at the end of these two stories, which one you think is more realistic. So I'll read it to you because it's easier if you hear it. The municipality of Know Where You Know commissions a new water tower to improve pressure for an expanding township. The consulting engineer delivers PDF drawings via email, flag number 1. The architect submits renders. Contractor receives a printed copy of the tender drawings during the site handover. 6 months into construction, the contractor discovers that the reinforcement details for the tower shaft conflict with the embedded starter bars shown on an outdated foundation drawing. The structural engineer is on leave. The updated drawings are buried in an email thread. The clerk of works is left guessing which version to follow. No one has a consolidated model, and information lives in different silos: emails, desktops, Dropbox folders. Site instructions are handwritten. They do finish the project, and when it's finally handed over, the municipality receives a stack of documents, as-built in PDF, warranties in hard copy, no asset register. And guess what? 6 months later, when the telemetry pump fails, the maintenance team cannot identify the part number without physically climbing the tower. Never happens like that. A couple of years later, the municipality attended this workshop and they thought, we've got to do something different. And they undertake another water tower, this time guided by a newly adopted digital delivery strategy. They developed a standardized employer's information requirement document, supported with a digital advisor, appointed a BIM coordinator within the consulting team. During the design, the consultant team works in a shared common data environment. The 3D model of the tower includes LOD 300 geometry with embedded asset tags for pumps, ladders, access hatches, and valves. Project manager, quantity surveyor, and contractor all access a coordinated model using Navisworks and BIM 360 or whatever they were using. Clash detection is run before going to site. Drawings are extracted directly from the federated model. During construction, the resident engineer uses a tablet to view the latest model, and all RFIs and technical queries are logged and tracked in the common data environment. At handover, the client receives a structured set of documentation and a tagged, verified as-built Revit model. Asset manager imports the model into their maintenance planning system. When the telemetry system needs replacing 2 years later, the maintenance team retrieves the asset code, the data sheet, and the supplier information in minutes. Never happens that way either, does it? Never. So what you've just seen there are two actually quite realistic scenarios, right? There's a as is and there's a new as is. And I think in the room we've probably got people who are experiencing blends of these things. I don't think anyone is firmly stuck in the disaster world, but none of us are firmly yet in this new world. So we find ourselves on a continuum of change. We're in that generation of switch over from making marks in paper to creating data. But this is unfortunately still a reality. Those of you who live in Pretoria, Tshwane, yeah, good luck finding a house plan if you haven't got it already. So I'm a trail runner, and I know what it's like to stand at the bottom of a massive climb like this and look up. The secret to surviving a climb like this is don't look up, just look ahead and figure out how not to trip. And I think that's where we are on our journey now as well. There's so much that we need to do, and that's why we've come up with this silly little metaphor called the 3 bears. We've got 3 minutes. For which part? Before we have lunch. Great. And the whole idea behind the 3 bears is to say, how do we take this picture? Hands up if you've seen this picture. Oh, you've all done your BIM training, well done. But it's a horrible picture, right? And this picture relates to a whole bunch of different models. Anyone seen the other models? I know you have. Yeah, that's our favorite guy. Yeah. But it's very complicated. So this is much easier to understand. So this is what we're going to be talking about after lunch, is to say, how do we position the various different options of not doing anything at all over here to bare minimum, have to get that right. This is probably where we're going to end up, and in a few years' time, we'll be there. And so if we start looking at our little 3 bears, I thought I had to just put a little bit of theory in here just to prove that we're not sucking our thumbs too hard. But if we take pre-BIM, baby, mama, and papa, you can see that it aligns very nicely with a number of different paradigms. If we go through them one by one, if you look at level 0, pre-BIM, totally unmanaged CAD, no structured information, no CDE, working in 2D CAD, no modeling, disconnected stuff, no workflows. Pretty much sounds like pre-BIM, right? Baby bear, okay, so now we're starting to get managed CAD, all right? Don't need Revit to do BIM. You can have managed CAD, properly defined line styles, properly defined levels, naming conventions on your cells and components. It's all possible in CAD. Even MicroStation can do that. Ad hoc project information, simple CDE. Okay, we're all working in SharePoint. We're all working in Aconex. BIM at a project level. So this project, we're going to do BIM. The other ones are a crazy shambles, but this one, we do BIM. And object-based modeling. You know, are we able to use the model itself or the components to start quantifying things? And I think where I believe, this is my personal view, this is where we need to aim as an industry in the short term. If we can do this in the next 5 years, wow, that'll be amazing. It's collaborative BIM. So we don't find ourselves in forced marriages on projects where one team is trying to do BIM and the others don't care. You know, let's work together and get it right. From an information perspective, working within a defined area in an organized fashion, targeting prescribed explicit information requirements. Working with organizations that can share each other's BIM standards with each other. Say, this is how we do it. Oh, this is how we do it. Great, let's find the middle way. Let's figure out how we're going to systematize our projects. And working in a very predefined, organized fashion. Somewhere in the future, I think we'll get to this. But again, that's the top of the mountain. You've got to just figure out how we get it going. So I believe that if we can get South Africa to get that middle road in the long term or the medium term, that's very, very important. But even if we don't, imagine what it would be like if we just got the basics right. You know, and if everyone started getting onto that journey, it would fundamentally change our day-to-day work. And that's what we're hoping to get out of today. So, lunch.